young people. The target is for young people up through age 25, although the teams can be mixed, but there has to be at least one person, 25 or under, to come on these calls with wonderful people from around the world, some people in Lebanon, some people outside of Lebanon, yes, and hear the story, hear some stories about the struggles and joys and wonders of being an entrepreneur and asking questions. We encourage all of the people who come on to either come with some questions or just get inspired by the discussion and ask some questions to help them in their entrepreneurial journey. And we're super excited about this program for a variety of reasons. But one is that we have wanted to work with young people. We've been working with startups in Lebanon in the region for many years, but we have wanted to work more with young people all across Lebanon. But thus far, we were really focused much more on sort of Beirut and Kuwait, Beirut, and people who could regularly make it to Beirut. And so now we're super thrilled about doing this program, largely virtual, largely distributed. And so through this, and we're committed, by the way, through this to have it be as high quality an experience. But through this, we want to be working with young people and teams all across the country, and then more effectively engaging mentors and supporters all around the world. So
hashtag scalable.
And what?
Hashtag scalable.
Hashtag scalable, yes. Hashtag supporting rock stars with rock stars.
Ooh.
And so we so just quick overview. Now is open house through Tuesday. We're having a sort of rolling deadline between July 28th to July 31st. So we're encouraging people to get in their applications early. Starting tomorrow, we're going to start letting some people know that they've been accepted into the sprint, but people can apply up through Tuesday, the end of the month. And then there's going to be this really awesome online facilitated sprint, but also with some partners in different parts of the country between August 4th and 11th. And then from there, we're going to select some rockstar teams to come to a one-day in-person, like half-day workshop in Beirut at the Grand Sarai, the head of government here. And then, because we're doing this in partnership with the Office of the Prime Minister and Alpha, the telecoms. And then from that August 13th event, we're having pitching to select teams for a basically 3-month accelerator program. And it's also going to be partially online, us providing support to people wherever they are and connecting them with mentors wherever the mentors are. But we're also going to do some activities where we get people together and sort of running these hybrid online, offline programs. So that's a quick overview. Now you have more of a frame about that and for these awesome startups. I know we have a bunch of startups who are a bunch of aspiring entrepreneurs and startup scouts who are on the call already. So I want to stop talking and spark just asking you a couple really quick questions.
Cool. Are we recording this?
Oh, we are recording this, yes. Sorry, do you see like the little record button?
Yeah.
The record light, something? Yeah, we are recording this. One thing that we are really working to do is spark more online discussion, so on the forum, but then also to capture some of this really valuable nuggets of knowledge that no doubt you will share with us, and no doubt the startups, the aspiring entrepreneurs will also share through their questions and their own experiences after this as well.
Okay, cool.
And I'm going to shift over actually in a little bit as well for Bilal to facilitate some of the Q&A, but I just wanted to start off with a super big thanks to Aurore for joining. I have known Aurore for many years. I don't know, it feels like forever. It feels like we were childhood friends, Aurore. 5, 6 years, something like that. I don't remember. 4 or 5 years. Aurore has been through Beirut many times and traveled around the Middle East. She is a wonderful entrepreneur in her own right and an investor, and has gone through the ups and the downs of the entrepreneurial journey, all of it, the breadth of it. And so that's why I was super excited to invite you to join and that you could accept and could join us. So just a quick first question of, I just gave like a little bit of an intro, but if you could start, you could do your own quick intro of yourself, but then also somehow a little bit of the flavor of this breadth of the entrepreneurial experience that you have gone through, and and maybe that you've heard from others, but just to give people a little sense from your experience of what is the range of possibilities of that journey and those experiences.
Okay, so big questions. But let's start with the small one, which I know, which is what I've done. So my name is Aurore Belfrage. I'm Swedish, part French, born in London, and lived in Saudi Arabia as a kid. And I think that's where I was infused with something magical of the MENA region, which meant that years later, I was drawn to MENA and traveled around there. But before that, I've worked as a scrap dealer, which means I've been CEO for scrap yards in Eastern Europe and in Northern Italy, recycling electronics, TVs, refrigerators and stuff. And I love the world of recycling. And especially now with the heat wave and I have global warming anxiety, I'm thinking maybe we should all go back to doing stuff to save the planet, but let's park that. And then I've founded and co-founded several mobile and tech businesses. And the one that's the most well-known was a very hyped company that we founded in 2011 in Sweden with some of the rock stars and the early employees of Spotify. This was May 2011. So you have to take it back tech-wise, what we knew then. This startup scene wasn't very hyped or discussed in Europe. There were a few businesses, but it was very much still a Silicon Valley phenomena. And we did what I jokingly say, we raised $26 million without having a product market fit. I mean, we obviously didn't use those buzzwords, but now looking back, that is what we did. And Niklas Sennström of Skype, and who now runs the VC Atomico, invested in us, as well as Reid Hoffman of Greylog, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn. So big names. And we successfully hyped ourselves and the capital that we'd raised and the product that we built, which was in the intersection between social, peer-to-peer, gifting, trying to drive consumers online, offline in purchasing. And I say successfully hyped ourselves because that's what we did. Did we successfully build a business? Well, you can say that we successfully built a piece of technology that's interesting, and we've pivoted a few times to do different things. But one of the things I learned a lot is what comes with hyping yourself and what doesn't come with hyping yourself. And which is something that I love to talk about because it's even more important now with the media and everything highlighting every single dollar that's raised and what that means, and unicorn. It's sometimes easy to forget that building a business is really, really difficult, and you cry most of the time, either actually or symbolic tears on a daily basis, and what that means and how you work through that process. So I'm happy to talk about a lot of the mistakes that we did in building that company, opening up 21 markets, recruiting a lot of people, firing a lot of people, building tech, building a product roadmap, prioritizing in that, how to deal with capital raised, how to deal with a team, how to build a culture, pace, build really quickly, build slowly, build something in between, who decides, what is quick, how do you run a board meeting, who takes decisions, investors, how involved should they be, etc., etc. And it's interesting, I haven't really told you what the product is, and I haven't really talked about the tech, but what's fundamentally interesting about building a company usually isn't the technology. There are some fantastically interesting IP-based AI something. But 95% of what is interesting is how you build the business. Organization, tax, culture, etc., etc. And then I spent 2 years in the Middle East, and I did a show where I joked about the bullshit of startups and how hard it is, and invested in some companies in the region. So I have a portfolio of Middle Eastern early stage businesses, worked with some of the local VCs, so I know the scene quite well. And then in 2015, I went back to Europe to raise a European fund, $630 million. And we've been live and investing since May 2016. And I've learned a lot about the other side. What's the rationale of the investor? How do we think? How do we identify companies? But also with the backdrop of this hype, unicorn, unicorn, unicorn. And given the narrative right now, I think everyone agrees with me, slightly depending on where you are in the market, capital is a commodity. And it's the entrepreneurs that have built interesting companies that get to choose the investors. And I'd love to talk about how you change that mind shift as an entrepreneur when you're raising money, and how you play the theater, because it's a theater with a lot of cues and symbolism and things that you have to do in order for VCs to say yes. And I find it's great joy in myth busting there in order for entrepreneurs to find it easier to raise capital. Blah, 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 blah. Now I've talked a lot, but there are a few of the things that I find interesting and hopefully can be useful.
Oh my goodness, Aurore. Okay, there are so many questions that I have that I think would be really interesting to talk about. I think that from now, and actually I just want to start with one, because I really, for everyone else on the call, please start thinking of the questions that you want to ask. Oh, raise my audio?
Yeah, put the microphone closer to your mouth.
Better.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully you folks can think of the other questions that you want to ask from wherever you are all around the country, because we are, there's so many interesting things, but I just want to start with one. There's so many things. So you just spoke about a whole ton of things that
you said talk about the range.
No, it's great. No, it's fantastic. You spoke about so many things that a team needs to think about at the beginning, just when they're starting. And that aligns with something that we often tell our startups, which is that there are 1,000 things that you should work on right now, and you're late on all of them. But you can actually only pick 5 of them, and you pick the right 5 that are critical for your startup, and you do them well and efficient, and you have a good chance of moving to the next stage. You pick the wrong 5, or you do them inefficiently, or you get lost, or you get lost in the jumble of all of these things, and you have a good chance of not going to the next stage.
Yeah.
So how do startups do that triaging? How do they figure out what are the 5? What do you think they can do to kind of filter down and be able to focus, but on what? Leave it to be allowed, and you folks to ask other questions, although I have many if you guys don't, but hopefully you guys come out with some good questions for Aurore.
One process thing, just before you answer, for anybody that wants to ask a question, let's just type it up first, and that way we have like the order of questions, and then if you'd like to read it out loud, I'll call on you and you can ask. And or I'm sorry to interrupt very briefly, just to put this process in place.
Okay, so Munir, that's a great question, and it's prioritizing and focus is obviously key. And I hate to speak in cliches and buzzwords, so I'll give a blanket apology for buzzwording. But one of the buzzwords that I do find interesting is unfair advantage. And what I mean by that is, why are you or your team or this timing or something that you've built going to make it work? And I meet a lot of companies, I meet a lot of startups around Europe, and say I only know Europe right now, but anyone that is coming to me with a problem that they're trying to solve and applying technology to solve that problem, I will bet you that I've met minimum 30 companies in Europe alone that are trying to solve the same problem. And they have the same target audience, and they have the same size of market, et cetera, and they're all going to take 10% of the market. I find that very interesting. Which means that you have to always be aware that you are not alone solving this problem. So the question isn't, is it an interesting problem to solve, or is the market big enough? Because most probably it is. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting there right now, drooling with enthusiasm about it. It is, are you going to beat the minimum 30 companies in Europe, another 10 in MENA, I don't know how many in China, and I don't know how many in the US they're trying to solve the same. So therefore, it becomes a very personal question. What's your unfair advantage? Who do you know on the client side? Or what's your something when it comes to the technology? Or and it's usually quite small, which means that it never makes it to the presentations. There's never a slide about this because it's something that they know about themselves, and therefore they take it for granted. And I think that's where one starts in this competition. It's a vague answer, but it requires a bit of thinking. Munir is going yes, and I think go-to-market is always a place to start.
Awesome, thank you so much, Aurore. That's great.
Yeah, Bilal,
I'm just gonna start picking from some of the the most important thing for us is seeing the amazing stuff that happens when we bring young entrepreneurs with some amazing mentors. So I'm gonna go to Karim. Please, would you like to ask your question? You can speak, or I can read it for you. Tfadal.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to ask what to focus on during a pitch. Should we focus on the story and the product itself, or should we focus on the numbers that if the startup is currently making revenues? Should I focus on the numbers, or should I focus on the product and its features?
Excellent question. And it's not a question. The way I see it is not necessarily what to focus on. It's to think about it as a timeline, where you have a certain period of time to convince someone that most probably will say no to a yes. And if you enter the room or the meeting knowing that he or she most probably will say yes, that changes the way you prioritize what you're going to say. That means you usually realize that in the first 30 seconds to a minute is where I need to convince them and buy 5 more minutes of their attention. So you have to think about it in terms of attention, which means that if your numbers is your key thing, X amount of people are downloading, or X amount of people are buying, or the revenue is, or something in the technology is amazing. Whatever it is, that's where you start. And not be aggressive about it, like the very salesy, but a bit like, hi, my name is, we're interested. And then a few nuggets of good things that get their attention. And that means you've bought another 5 minutes of their mental span, and then you broaden it out like that. And the trick is, in my opinion, is to quite quickly stop talking and let your investor start asking questions. Because that means he or she is engaged. They need to be paying attention in order for them to ask questions. And that's when you start getting a dynamic. Classic mistake is entrepreneurs speak 10, 15, 20, 35 minutes because there's so much cool stuff to talk about. And I'm sure there is, but they lose interest. So you need to keep them engaged. And if you see that you're losing them, ask them a question. See if you can turn around the dynamics in the room to make the investor pitch to you. So Mr. Investor or Mrs. Investor, how do you work with my client base? Do you know anyone in the telco industry in MENA? Do you know any banks? Do you have any connections in government? Or do you know any of these retail brands? And what you'll see is he or she will start bragging. Yes, I do. I know several people in the banking industry that I could introduce you to. And the energy is shifted. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I hope that helps a little.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, Bilal. I have another question. I was typing, but I couldn't send it. Can I ask it quickly?
You can, but I would like to give an opportunity to Mohammed to pick one of his questions, and then depending on if there's some time, we'll get back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So Mohammed, Tfadal, if you'd like to ask one of your 2 questions, pick the one that's the most important to you and go for it.
I think my question was answered. Which was what are the 3 most important things that you would like a startup to communicate with you during a pitch? I think that one wasn't that covered, but question 2 was covered by Karim's question.
So again, and I agree, it's covered, but it's a slightly different angle. But it's why you.
Very similar.
It's very similar, but what's interesting is the answers, in my opinion, never come down to the hard numbers. The hard numbers for me is a given. I'm going to assume that you've got cool technology. I'm going to assume that it works. I'm going to assume that you have clients moving and that you have an idea of the business model that you want. So especially in the early stages, what you're selling in a pitch is you. And you're selling the adventure that you're building, or the opportunity of the company, or the learning opportunity. So you need to somehow make sure that
Have distinguished mentors.
Sorry?
Have distinguished mentors.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
So yeah, so that's the unfair advantage: having connections other people don't have, and having access to talent in the team that isn't found elsewhere. Correct?
Exactly. That's a great advantage. And I would be careful with the distinguished mentors, because I would add something, and they help me.
Oh, of course.
No, but it's not, of course. A lot of people collect names and show off a smorgasbord, to use a Swedish word, but a lot of names, and they don't actually call these people, and those people actually don't help. So you need to casually demonstrate how they helped you. So, for example, distinguished mentor number 3, I was able to call, and she introduced me to my top 3 clients.
Okay.
And it has to be naturally in conversation. So the investor realizes, without you telling him or her too bluntly, that you have a network that works, and that works for you, and that you can call, and that you're not afraid of calling. They're not too high up, so you don't call them. It's not the King of Sweden.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mohammed. Actually, Theodore put up a question on the forum. So, Aurore, so you understand, one of the things we're wanting to do is really take advantage of your time and your wisdom and like your generosity in sharing and answering our questions, and make it so that you don't have to keep answering the same questions over and over and over, and make it a resource for people. So we have this little community forum, and I'm posting it in the chat, and some people are asking questions there, and I'm encouraging everyone, if you got an excellent answer, remember it. And the best way to thank Aurore for her time is to pay it forward. So you could write up the answer that you've learned and in this forum, and then it'll be there for the next person. So the question for Aurore is from Theodore: what is your advice for the right time to fundraise? Like the right time to fundraise for, yeah.
Okay, so it's a good question, and it's a hard question. So generally speaking, I tend to think that one should wait as long as possible, especially in the early stages. So it's different for different phases. But if you're looking for angel capital, seed capital, maybe your A round, I would wait until you have enough interesting stuff to create leverage in the conversation. If you're still in an ideas phase, or you haven't any clients yet, etc., it becomes very difficult to convince an investor. Not impossible, but you just spend a lot of time and you get a lot of no's. And there's nothing actually wrong with a no, but most people lose energy and lose confidence after every no. And that in itself is bad for your team, for your morale. And so trying to avoid a situation where you go from no to no to no. So if you can wait, and this is an excellent exercise for co-founders and management to do. How long, and everyone needs to be very honest, how long can we go without salary? And it will be different for different people in the team. Some people can't. I need to pay rent, or I don't have any savings. And for someone else, it might be 5 months, 6 months, a year and a half. But only by being honest in your team about how long you can wait and last, then you can set the timeline of when you have to fundraise, so to speak. So waiting as long as possible to have interesting things to dazzle them in the first minute to get their attention. The other thing, and this is again a cliche, and it needs to be done elegantly, is building relationships with VCs before you actually need it, which is a paradox, contrary to what I just said. So it's an interpersonal game, and sometimes I feel a lot of entrepreneurs email me a lot in advance of wanting to raise capital, and it's very unpersonal, and it's very mass email. I'll get a mass email with paragraph after paragraph after paragraph about what they've achieved over the last month or so. And it's probably interesting, but I don't read it. And I think one needs to assume that busy people don't have time to read paragraph after paragraph. So when I say build a relationship, be genuine about it. Have specific questions, meet someone for a coffee, maybe just 15, 20 minutes, and update them on what you're doing in advance for raising capital. And don't blanket email, because it usually doesn't put you in a better position. But timing is difficult.
Can I just add something on this? So, yeah. So I'm tutor. I'm part of the team here at Startup Scouts, responsible for the curriculum. So I'm just trying to be a bit of the pessimist or the devil's advocate. So what would be the value that we can provide when we invite someone for a coffee? Because they're busy, they have lots to do, probably many options to fill their calendar. Why would they meet someone for a coffee if we are that early?
Excellent question. And I think one needs to be very frank and deliberate about how you do this, because the assumption needs to be, just as you say, that people are busy and don't want to waste time, so to speak. And if they're not going to read a long email explaining what you've done, you need to have something genuine to tell, or a genuine question. And I usually find the power of vanity works if it's done elegantly, which means, Mrs. Investor or Mr. Investor, I have a question for you. I am tweaking my business model and I'm playing with these options. What would you suggest here? I am looking at employing a CMO. I have these 3 candidates. Do you mind if we take a few minutes and discuss options, etc.? Or at these conferences, come and say hi and talk about either what you're doing or where the industry is heading. And again, it's important to be genuine. It can sometimes feel as an investor that a lot of people come and then they give you a 30-second elevator pitch, and they're speaking so quickly that it's completely impossible to understand what they're saying. And they don't see you. They see investor, and then they throw their pitch at you, and you don't feel special or understand why it happens. So I agree with your devil's advocate. One needs to be very actually genuine and very deliberate in how you take people's time.
Thank you.
So we have other questions here from Karim Kaakani. I think Karim asked a question. I wanted to just ping Wael, Emil. Has anything struck your fancy? Are you curious about something to ask Aurora? And if not, otherwise we'll go to Karim's question. Okay, yalla, Karim, tafadhal. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, please. I want to ask, in my case, where I am making revenues, I don't know, what should I prioritize? Is it the product itself and the service development, or is it the marketing and how I should reach more people? And what should I focus on? Is it a
B2C or a B2B business?
Hmm?
Is it a B2C or a B2B business?
B2C. It's an online grocery shop.
It's an online grocery shop. And does it work?
Yeah, it's been in the market for around 4 months, a bit more, and it's doing pretty well. So should I focus on reaching more people, going to, for example, I cover Beirut and its surroundings. Should I go to further cities, or should I develop the product and focus on my customers? And
without knowing, so it's hard to give advice without having full facts, but my initial thought when I hear that is, because you're not building something that tech-wise is super exciting. It's a technology that exists already, and people are doing it in other markets, and you're doing a copy-paste, and you're localizing it to your segment. Which means for me, as an investor, what I would be interested in is how many customers have you reached? And I will never ask any questions about the technology itself. So I would focus, make sure that your design is something that you're proud of. And especially if you have any competitors in the cities that you're going in, you need to make sure that you're sleeker and better. But I would definitely spend the majority of my focus on customer acquisition and the customer acquisition cycle. How do you reach as many people as possible, onboard them for as low cost as possible, and understanding that journey. Each channel costs this much, gains me that much, the retention rate is, etc., etc. And once you have that full chart, then you know where you need to start focusing. The retention is really low. Okay, maybe it was the design, as we spoke about in the beginning, or the you lose people during the onboarding, or etc., etc.
Okay.
Customers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna just hop in because I'm
Thank
curious. From something that you mentioned a couple of times in your introduction, you kept using this word hype, and you said something about like what happens when you hype yourself and what doesn't happen when you hype yourself. And I felt like there was something there that I want to hear more about. So if you'd be willing to share what you meant by that, I'd love to hear.
No, it is an interesting topic because it's not one that you talk about that much. And in order for this money flowing circus that VC actually is, and one needs to see it for what it is, one needs to create hype. And some of the VCs are kingmakers, and there's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out in the industry, and people follow on, and money follows where the hype is, so to speak. And in order as an entrepreneur to be able to get on the big bandwagon for the big money to build the big business, there's an element of hype that you need to create around yourself in terms of the technology, the size, the growth, whatever your KPI is. The backside of that, the flip side of what happens to people mentally in the company is really interesting. And as a management, one needs to be wary of that because it's a loser focus. So for us, we raised a lot of money and we hyped ourselves, and we were in the media and we were talking about new, innovative, and we use these big words about ourselves. In the doors of the office, within our four walls, there was something happened where we felt we're going to be millionaires. We're going to be millionaires. And then, as always happened, the hype turns. Shit happens, and the media suddenly wants to kill its darling, and the headlines are disaster, disaster. And what happens then within the team is, I'm not going to be a millionaire. I'm not going to be a millionaire. And both of these scenarios are disaster because you're not building the business. You're thinking about something else. And as a management, one needs to balance this, which is, i.e., create enough hype to make sure that you're on this cycle, but you need to protect the team and you need to be super clear about building the business. And it sounds like such a banal thing to do, but it's really hard when you're in the middle of that or when it spirals down. So it's something to think about.
Very, very interesting. One point, I'm just gonna give you an email, and there's some stuff I want to talk to you about this, about hype, and about ambition, and about about the Taoist philosophy, and Wu Wei, and about like this whole circus of investment and why play the circus. Anyway,
look forward to that evening.
Oh, Asif, I'm speaking a little too loud for a co-working space. I'm gonna go and we had a question from Mohammed. So You just made me laugh too loud. That's the problem. Okay, so Mohammed, تفضل if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes. Okay. I'm starting an equity crowdfunding platform with some kind of a niche, and I took a data sample today. I took 77 responses, where half of the people, half of the investors are like 18 to 25. They would like to invest, but they don't know how to invest, and I have a solution for that. And providing money over time would be a good way to kind of make the round of funding goes to the startup when they show certain deliverables.
Interesting questions. So just to understand, what phases would you be investing in?
Let's say a startup has an idea, so they promote themselves on our platform. Then after that, people who want to pledge for them would do it and buy equity from them. However, the money doesn't go to them immediately because security is an issue when people want to invest. It often makes people uninterested. So the money goes slowly. It's a stream while they show the customers deliverables, where customers have the right to either continue with that transaction or no. Do you think that this can be a good measure if we modify it and tweak it a bit?
Yeah, no, there's something interesting there. To follow,
we're forcing the startup. We're forcing the startup to show deliverables and actually be productive. And fraud is kind of a thing here, so we're stopping fraud in a sort of way.
So I have two comments because there's something there, and I like the idea because you're identifying a problem with early stage investing, and that's risk and deliverables, and
exactly. I'm hedging risk, sort of.
But I don't think you've nailed it yet.
It's modifying.
I see two problems. One is early stage investing is super high risk by definition.
I'm trying to just decrease the volatility. It is stocks in general are volatile, but I'm trying to reduce that risk to attract people who otherwise wouldn't invest, and show them that they're not just throwing away their money. They will see things.
But I think that's where you have a problem, mainly because even though you put together checks and balances, and the money is only invested when certain deliverables are hit, I think because building a tech business early stage is so difficult and you can't plan, a lot of these companies will fail either way. So you'll have to think about how you communicate that 90% of the capital will be probably wasted anyway, even though you've done the checks and balances. And that's a really hard sell. That's one. And the other thing is, I believe in building tech businesses that are scalable. And we were joking about it in the beginning. You're building in something that makes your business less scalable, because that means you need to have a team that goes through every single company and makes sure that the deliverables that they've said are the right KPIs, that they're ambitious enough, they've actually met them, etc. So you have to do a quarterly or a monthly DD on all the businesses on your platform.
May I comment? It's like we're letting the investors decide if they want to continue or no. We're like show them like notifications where the parts of their money will be delivered, and we're kind of dividing the money where the investors will decide. So the work is not on us. They're either free to continue with that investment or no. So no, we're not actually working there. Okay. We are scalable.
That makes sense. I mean, I think it's definitely worth trying. I think
just giving them the option. It shouldn't even require sprints. Just give them the option. So that way we're forcing I got an idea right now. It's like forcing the startup to just show what they have without defining anything.
Yeah.
And just getting the money along the way. So I think it's promising.
It is, and it's interesting. You should Google, I think it's YC on their information Q&A on their homepage, Y Combinator. Talk about their
Paul Graham, I
portfolio.
think.
Sorry?
Paul Graham is. I saw a video. Maybe the CEO was Paul Graham.
No, and it's about the companies. It might have been someone else that talked about it, but it talks about portfolio over time and how most VCs get it wrong in terms of which are the companies that actually perform. And there's an interesting, call it trend or phenomena, where certain amount of companies don't become the superstars or aren't seen as the superstars by the VC companies, which means that the VCs let them be. They have their own time to build their own company, and they don't have VCs meddling every day, which means that they get a bit of breathing space, and then they rocket.
At one point, we'll be building a secondary market, so people who are unhappy with the stock can just sell it away. So
yes,
we thought about that.
That's really interesting.
We thought about that.
Yeah. Secondary market is really interesting because it's a very illiquid market. And
exactly. Some people will have to wait for like 6 years to sell their stock. I actually did a survey about that, and those are people's concerns. I even sent an email to the Prime Minister. I hope he replies.
I would say that's an even more interesting market because it
gives good commissions and enables people to actually invest.
Yeah. Cool. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Mohammed, and for the lively discussion, everyone. Mohammed Barraj, I see you've got this look in your eye. You've been very thoughtful this entire time. Where are you? You know, I'm just curious if you'd be willing to share with us, as my first time getting to know you, would you be willing to share a little bit about what brought you to this call, and maybe if you have a project or if you're thinking about starting up, where are you at?
So I'm Lebanese. I live in Beirut. Recently, I developed a small business that I will launch very soon. It's about mixing between product design and greenery. And I was listening to all the comments you were talking about and all the ideas you were sharing on Zoom. And I felt that I experienced a big part of these events you mentioned before. Like talking to the suppliers, interacting with people, the pitch elevator, selling your idea, and it sounds exciting and motivational.
Glad. So when is the launch of the product?
The launch of the product will be on 8 August 2018. It will be launched in Masrah Al Madina in Beirut, in an event with Nawaya NGO. In Hamra, and I'm preparing for this brand since a year. So I developed a lot of ideas, the marketing, the branding, the quotation, everything related to a good business.
Looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Yeah, that's really amazing. So I'm gonna go back to I'm curious, because you're so involved, I'm sure you might have some good resources. You mentioned Reid Hoffman briefly, and I actually really love his podcast. And it's not just entertaining, it's fascinating, and it's rich. And I was wondering if you had any other resources that people, especially in early stage businesses, could read, or podcasts that they could listen to. I feel like we can have you maybe, on a call once, but if you can point us in the right direction, we could get some great resources.
Ooh, well, it depends on what you're interested in. Currently, I love a VC, his daily blogs, because they're short and sweet, and there's always something interesting there. As I said, Y Combinator has everything in terms of if I'm Googling something, and they've been very generous in sharing what should a term sheet look like, what is entrepreneur-friendly terms, like a lot of the dealings with the VC. And I use them as a reference sometimes, because basically on a weekly basis, I'll get an entrepreneur that wants me to sign an NDA. No, I will never sign an NDA. And instead of explaining why it's never going to happen, you can refer to YC, who's written it all up, and they're good. I'm currently fascinated about the different AI and ML movements, especially when it comes to government and defense stuff. So that's quite niche. But in general, I mean, A16Z is always interesting. It's a great way, the Andreessen Horowitz blog and pod. And then for the life of me, I can't remember now. And I will write it and I will send it to you so you can share it. It's a series of 12 episodes of an author that's asking these impossible technical issues and inviting in guests and stuff. And I can't remember. I've been listening to it too much. Send you the link.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. And it actually is beginning. So one thing that we don't actually have on the community platform right now is a resources section, just a general place to add all this stuff. And I think we just have a beautiful beginning to an excellent library.
Someone in the region who writes well is Amir Farah of Becco Capital.
Amir Farah, Becco, B-E-C-C-O?
BECO. They sit in Dubai, and Amir is one of the partners there. And he writes on Medium, not regularly, I'd say once a month, and he usually tweets about it. But it's very useful, tangible stuff, especially for the region, both in terms of how do I value my business, how to think of a VC, how to scale to a new market, etc. So that's someone I would recommend. Shout out to Amir.
Awesome. Definitely shout out to Amir, and potentially, if he'd be willing, maybe we can get him to come on and do one of these fireside chats.
Yes, you should definitely do that. He's awesome.
Cool. Does anybody have any questions? I have a couple of questions myself, but I don't want to take up too much space. So if there's anybody else here that has a burning question, now's your chance. You basically have 5 minutes before we're ending this call on time. So, okay. So here's I got a bunch of them just based on your really quick introduction. But one of them you've already mentioned just a little bit, and it's about authenticity. And one of the things that we've done in our research is we've identified, many people have identified that authenticity is one of the signature strengths of all entrepreneurs. It's like we use a psychological assessment profile called the VIA, the Values and Action Characters Profile. And in the research, it shows that being able to be honest with yourself and others is one of the highest correlates with a successful entrepreneur. And I'm wondering how you can know this. I know that you know this. And at the same time, you mentioned that the entire like investment ecosystem is like a show and posturing and like positioning and like making a play performance. You called it a performance. And I'm wondering how you can bring these two things that seem impossible to bring together, like truly being authentic and having real relationships. And at the same time having to posture, or do you see what I'm trying to get at? I'm just wondering how that's possible.
And I agree. So the way I think about it is it's a theater, and you can debate and you can be annoyed about the fact that the majority of VCs around the world are relatively arrogant and quite short. It's hard to get their time and it's hard to get their attention, and which has created an arrogant aura around them. And I find it a waste of time to get annoyed about it. It's how do you play that to your advantage, right? And in that theater, I recommend identifying what are the few symbolic stuff that buy you a bit more time of their attention. So talking about a few key things, and one of them tends to be classifying yourself correctly. Are you an angel round? Are you a seed round? Are you an A round or a B round? And this seems completely irrelevant. You're building a business. So fitting into their model seems like a waste of time. But because they will mentally shut down if you use the wrong word. If it's an A round fund and you said seed, they won't listen to anything else you had to say, which for me seems like a waste of time. So say the right things in order for them to mentally go, I tick the boxes. I'm allowed to invest, because you have to think about it that way. This is a financial vehicle that has deliberate rules on how much and when and who to invest in what time. So just do your homework so you fit the bill. And then it's about being genuine. And Munir and I have talked about this a lot over the years. Personally, I find a lot of this circus of pitching and competitions and being on stage and juries unhelpful and a waste of time. Unhelpful in the sense that it's not portraying the relationship correctly. So as a VC, it's not my money. VCs have raised capital from other investors, LPs, and they have really high targets from their investors to hit their targets, which means every VC that you meet, unless it's a family office, has a boss and needs to partner up with great companies in order to hit their targets. So it's very much an equal relationship. But this circus with competitions and juries and asking mean questions and putting entrepreneurs on the spot makes it feel like the VC is the more powerful one in the relationship. And if you continue to do pitches and you continue to see the VC as the powerful party in the relationship, and you act more and more like a child asking mama and papa for candy money, you won't get the right genuine partnership out of it. So I'd say get out of that theater, have a cup of coffee, look for a partner, have an adult conversation with an investor about what you're trying to build and how you're going to do it and how much capital you need. And when I see how much capital you need, is you've identified the costs for the different steps that you need to take over the next 6 to 8 months. And don't allow him or her as a VC to judge you as a more powerful party in the relationship just because they sit on the cash. You sit on the tech, you sit on the business building, you sit on the opportunity, and you're going to do the hard work. And you just have shift in mind.
That actually really helped me a lot in reframing and restructuring and thinking about the importance of equality and authenticity. I think it relates to every relationship, from interpersonal relationships, partnerships of all sorts. So that's a really beautiful way of thinking about the world. And I think it's one of the reasons why I love entrepreneurship, is because it helps people realize that they have a sense of agency in the world as creative actors. And when you were talking today about like looking at the global warming and the heat wave and thinking, what can I do about it? That is exactly why I support entrepreneurship, and I encourage people to start reshifting their agency in the world. And this point that you brought up today of authenticity and of equality is super valuable. We're getting really close to the end of our time together, and we have a couple of questions. And just because it would be super awesome if this happened, we're really wanting this community platform to be a place where questions get built up. For everyone that has a question that typed it into the chat right now that hasn't had it answered, if Aurore would be willing to give maybe 30 minutes of time at some point later this week to just get on the forum and see if there are any questions remaining from this call. Yeah, so let's take these questions that we have over here, let's plop them into the community forum, and I'll send you an invitation link, and that's where everyone will have their questions answered. And hopefully, if Aurore ever wanted to continue talking with Mohammed about his this investment platform or whatever, then there could be some opportunities for people reaching out in an authentic way and building some of these relationships.
Exactly.
So I want to thank you. Yeah.
No, and a great way to contact me is also following me on Twitter. So Aurore Belfrage is my handle on Twitter.
Yeah, so thank you, Aurore, so much. I never knew about your scrap dealer days, and we didn't get a chance to talk about aubergine at all, which is a real tragedy. You know, next time we come to Beirut, we're going out to Mazian and having some fettet beidinjan, that's for sure. But thank you, everybody, for joining, everyone for your questions, everyone for your participation. Startup Scouts is a mode. It's a massive online doing experience, and everyone that came on this call is a doer, and you're the ones that are going to make it forward and take your projects into the future. So thank you for putting in all this effort, showing up, asking great questions. Put your questions up in the community platform. Aurore, thank you so much. I miss you. Munir, if you have any closing remarks, let us know. But this was really enjoyable. And for everyone that wasn't here, and if you want to watch this video again, as soon as it ends, I'm going to upload it as an unlisted video and put it directly into Aurore's forum post on the community platform. So share it with your other teammates or your friends, and let's keep the ball rolling.
Awesome, folks. Look forward to it. And Aurore, thanks so much. The Startup Scouts, thanks so much. Bilal, thanks so much. And we'll see you soon.
Yalla.
Yes.
Salam.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, everybody. Oh, this is actually, I'm really happy. Every time we do these things, I realize the power of what we're trying to do. And it's been, in terms of like getting scalability around things that are really hyper personal. So thanks for everyone. Au revoir.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Isidore.